What historical events are so absurd they would be too strange for a fiction story or movie? The Spanish conquistadors found platinum during their search for gold and dumped all of it into the sea because they thought platinum was inferior to silver. Well, you can just throw that on the long list of stupid, horrible things the conquistadors managed to do. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Scrubby here, back again with another video. Hope you guys are having a great day. I know I am. And today we're going to be taking a look at this Reddit thread that basically contains some of the most insane things from history that just don't sound real. I know it's not everyone's standard cup of tea here on the channel, but I found it interesting, so I figured I would make it into a video. And yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, let's get into it. The RMS Carmania. In 1914, just after the outbreak of the First World War, Germany had a cunning idea. They needed to ensure naval superiority in the Atlantic, but there was no way they could manufacture enough new battleships in order to contest what was traditionally Britain's inviolate domain. So they took the SMS Cap Trafalgar, an 18,000-ton luxury ocean liner, and retrofitted it with two 4.1-inch guns and 6 1-pound pom-pom cannons, and also had one of the funnels removed so that this colossal Frankenstein monster of a ship would appear to be a cruiser under the command of the British Merchant Navy. The ruse complete, it would prowl the South Atlantic under false flags, dressed as a British ship. It could approach the British supply line and at the last minute fly German colors before wreaking havoc and undermining the until now unimpeachable British Navy. They even renamed it the RMS Carmania, RMS standing for Royal Mail Ship, a type of fast steamer used to carry international post. To complete the illusion and ensure it would never be recognized as being formerly German passenger cargo ship until it was far, far too late. Military historians generally concur that it was a bold but brilliant plan, and at a fraction of the time and cost of a new custom-built battleship. The newly christened RMS Carmania should cost the British fleet thousands of lives and millions of tons of lost ship before it could be reliably identified, except for one tiny problem. On the 14th of September 1914, after a fruitless first voyage ending with no sightings of any targets and being forced to refuel empty-handed, the RMS Carmania met its first ever opponent off the coast of Trinidad. It was the RMS Carmania, a 19,000-ton ocean liner retrofitted with 8 4.7-inch guns and deployed by the real British Merchant Navy. From 4 miles away, the real RMS crew realized the ship they were looking at was in fact not the ship that they're standing on and opened fire. It took 2 hours of vicious Age of Sail style broadsides, but eventually the doppelganger was sunk, with the maimed victor limping away under escort to Brazil for repairs. Towards the end of the fight, the first ship to arrive was a German ship called the SS Kronprinz Wilhelm. At this point, the British RMS Carmania was barely afloat, holed beneath the waterline and likely to be finished off by a breeze. But the Kronprinz Wilhelm just turned and left without getting involved. Turns out it had been listening to SOS calls from both ships and knew that the RMS Carmania had sunk, but wasn't sure which was which. Rather than investigate and likely get caught by other British ships answering the same call, they decided it might be a trap and left. Because of this, it was rescued and went on to sail for another 18 years. And another fact, the RMS Carmania had a sister ship called the Caronia, and together they were known as the Pretty Sisters. This was public information, and the Cap Trafalgar was deliberately disguised as the Pretty Sister based on the designs and appearance. So it's not even as though the original ship was deliberately disguised as the Carmania. It was a 50-50 chance they could have impersonated the Caronia, save for the name painted on the front of the hull. The outcome could have been very different, save for a coin flip between the two names. The RMS Carmania had gone to Trinidad because they knew that the nearby islands were being used as a staging post for German ships, and they first encountered was another retrofitted ship that had been sent there to hunt for cargo. Effectively, the RMS Carmania was secretly retrofitted cargo ship hunting another secretly retrofitted cargo ship that itself was secretly hunting cargo ships, but couldn't find any except for the one that wasn't a cargo ship anymore and who knew that they weren't one because it wasn't a secret anymore. So basically, spy versus spy barely begins to cover it. Bro, this entire thing reads like something that, yeah, you would just assume never happened. What are the odds that they have a 50-50 coin flip, pick the wrong name, and then bump into that exact ship that's gonna be the only one aware that it's a fake? Seriously, man, at that point, if you're on that crew, you just kind of have to accept the fact that, like, you're going to Davy Jones' locker and there's not much you can do about it. That's the stars aligning right there. One of 11 children born to Charles and Maria Sachs, Adolphe was born extremely accident-prone and barely made it to adulthood. At 3, he fell 3 floors down, bashing his head on a stone floor at the bottom. He drank a bowl of acidic water, believing it was milk. He swallowed and subsequently passed a large needle. He flew across his father's workshop and was burned badly when a barrel of gunpowder exploded. He fell upon a hot cast iron pan on a stove, burning his side. He frequently slept in a room where varnished furniture was drying, somehow avoiding poisoning and asphyxiation, and was hit on the head with a slate roof tile while walking down the street. He also fell in a river and nearly drowned. This is the same child who some force was failing miserably to unalive, grew up, and had the audacity to invent the saxophone. Honestly, dude, I feel like he made it through all of that, so they had to let him invent something good, right? You know, they were looking down at him, they're like, holy crap, how did he survive all that? I don't know, but you gotta make him a genius now. He's gotta invent an instrument of some sort. That dude had the unluckiest childhood I'd ever heard of. Wojtek, the soldier bear. He served in the Polish army in World War II, helping his fellow soldiers carry crates of ammunition into battle, saving precious time during combat. He had been recruited as a soldier when his division had to board an English ship which didn't allow animals on board. In outrage, the Polish then made him a soldier, and he lived through the war to die of old age in a zoo in 1963. I think war is obviously horrifying, you know, never been there, never hope to be, don't draft me. That being said, few things could make it more horrifying than like the sounds of war going on and then just a bear charging at you. Douglas Bader, RAF flying ace with 23 kills, although he had previously lost both of his legs in separate flying accidents. He wore a pair of clinky tin legs. He was shot down over France in 1941, and the Luftwaffe were so pleased to have captured him, they arranged for the RAF to drop a pair of his legs as a designated place and time, and cleared the sky for the drop to proceed. The RAF did indeed drop legs as arranged, but since all German fighters and anti-aircraft had been stood down as arranged, it seemed a waste to not bomb a nearby enemy airfield. Meanwhile, Bader was stumping about on his tin legs, was a great hit with his Nazi captors. At a great party held by the Luftwaffe in his honor, he drank them under the table, excused himself to a third-floor bathroom, shimmied down the drain pipe, and then stumped off into the darkness. He was only recaptured by a German spy in the resistance, and for the next 4 years he continually escaped and was recaptured until he was finally sent to Colditz. After the war, there was a great spirit of reconciliation and togetherness between the air forces on both sides, and Bader was not convinced. He was invited to address a crowd of assembled now ex-Luftwaffe pilots and began his speech, "Seeing so many of you here today, I am stuck by a single thought. I didn't get enough of you guys." Honestly, dude, I don't understand why they were friends afterwards. I'm pretty sure the German Air Force were 100% the bad guys in this situation, and being captured and recaptured 700 times is gonna make you hate anyone. I just can't believe this dude was really out here being a BA pilot, taking down 23 different aircrafts and whatnot, just flying around, escaping without legs. That's some willpower, dude. Shimmying down a drain pipe and stumping into the darkness. That's what it described it as? What an absolute unit to just be on the run from an enemy force behind enemy lines without legs. The British Secret Service created a sabotage device consisting of a dead rat filled with explosives. Back then, for safety, if you saw a dead rat, you scooped it up with a spade and chucked it into a furnace. This would ignite the explosives and blow up the building, and it happened enough that the Germans started calling in their bomb squad for every dead rat. I'm assuming in the middle of a war zone, there tends to not be a whole lot of hygiene going on, so could you imagine how busy the bomb squad was? This is low-key genius. Keep them so preoccupied with tossing rats in a furnace that they never worry about the actual bombs. Battle of the Karansebes. That time in the 1700s, when the Austrian army got confused, waged a huge battle against itself within its own lines and lost estimated several hundred to few thousand men and a lot of equipment and money in the process, and then they retreated. The Ottomans, who they were originally intended to fight, showed up 2 days later. How do you accidentally have a war with your own team, bro? Like, you know, did they get mismatching uniforms or something? What about the fact that they're literally all speaking German because they're Austrian? That's the official language of Austria. But like, you know, if you're supposed to be fighting the Ottoman Empire, I'm pretty sure they spoke Turkish. So at some point when everyone's yelling in German, you should realize it's the wrong team. The latrine disaster of Erfurt. In 1184, the King of Germany, Heinrich VI, held court in the Petersburg citadel in Erfurt. On the morning of the 26th of July, the weight of the assembled nobles caused the wooden second story of the floor to collapse. Most of them fell into the latrine cesspit below the ground floor, and about 60 of them drowned in liquid excrement. government. Well, as far as all the ways to go, that's probably one of the crappiest. Seriously though, my goodness, 60 nobility falling into liquid poop and drowning is a sign that, your king is clearly not the one that should be running stuff. Back in the 1780s, after being elected president, George Washington decided to send a letter to Congress that basically said, hey, look forward to working with you all, this will be very exciting. However, George wasn't very eloquent and was generally busy and stressed, so he asked his friend James Madison to compose the letter to Congress, which James did. When Congress received the letter, they decided to respond in kind, and not wanting to slight the new president, they wanted to send back a letter that said, we're glad you're excited, so are we. But they decided there was no one better in Congress to write the letter than their very own James Madison. So James writes a response to the letter he wrote in the first place, and Congress sends it to George, and George decided to respond with something along the lines of like, oh, I'm glad that you're excited too. And since his buddy James did such an excellent job with the first letter, he wanted him to write it again and compose the response. Congress received the letter, and again, not wanting to be awkward and ignore the president, decided to reply with yet another letter saying, hey, we're excited to see that you're excited that we're excited. And once again, James Madison composed the response. So James Madison, future 4th president of the United States, wound up writing himself 4 letters back and forth between George Washington and Congress and was too embarrassed to tell anyone about it while it was going on. Yeah, I could obviously understand why he's like too embarrassed to tell anyone while it's going on. The Congress, oh my god, this George guy is so nice. He wrote us a very own handwritten letter to tell us he's excited. This is incredible. We've got to get our best writer on it. James, will you do it? Meanwhile, James is sitting there like, oh my god, how long am I gonna have to talk to myself before people realize? May have been said already, but when Napoleon returned to France from his exile, a regiment of French soldiers were sent by the coalition powers to intercept him. Upon seeing them, Napoleon approached and said, if you wish to kill your emperor, here I am. The commander of the regiment ordered his man to open fire, and out of the 2,000 soldiers present, not a single one obeyed the order. They all joined Napoleon and marched to Paris with him, truly a real-life Mary Sue. At least he thought he was, until he was thoroughly beaten and exiled again, permanently this time. Bro, he had to have felt like he was straight up in the Hollywood movie. I know Hollywood movies didn't exist when Napoleon was around, alright? But imagine telling 2,000 soldiers, shoot me if you wish. And then he's like, open fire. And none of them do. And then they join you and march to Paris. He probably felt like the main character so hard until he got beaten. The marathon at the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis. The first place finisher did most of the race in a car. He had attempted to drop out and get a car back to a stadium and get a change of clothes, but just kind of started jogging when he heard the fanfare. The second place finisher was carried across the finish line, legs technically twitching by his trainers, because they had been refusing him water and giving him a mixture of brandy and rat poison for the race. Doping wasn't illegal yet, and this was a terrible attempt at it, so he got the gold when the first guy was revealed. Third finisher was unremarkable somehow. The fourth finisher was a Cuban mailman who had raised the funds to attend the Olympics by running non-stop around his entire country. He landed in New Orleans and lost all the traveling money on a riverboat casino and ran the race in dress shoes and long trousers, cut off at the knee by a fellow competitor with a knife. He probably would have come in first, well, second behind the car, had it not been for the hour nap he took on the side of the track after eating rotten apples he found on the side of the race. 9th and 12th were from South Africa and ran barefoot. South Africa didn't actually send a delegation, they were just students who happened to be in town and thought it sounded fun. 9th was chased a mile off course by angry dogs. Half the participants had never even raced competitively before, and some died, and St. Louis only had one water stop on the entire run. This, coupled with dusty roads, exacerbated by cars kicking up dust, led to the above fatalities, and yet somehow rat poison guys survived to get the gold. The Russian delegation arrived a week late because they were still using the Julian calendar in 1904. The early 1900s is just the most weird era of history because it's like, yeah, we kind of have really recent recorded history, detailed stuff like this, but at the same time, we're morons who are using rat poison to try to dope people for faster racing or, not letting people drink water while running a marathon. It's insane that that's only 120 years ago, considering how stupid all of that sounds. The assassination of U.S. President James A. Garfield. Basically, this guy named Charles wrote some essays campaigning for Ulysses S. Grant's failed 1880 nomination, and when Garfield ran for president, Charles Controlled-F the other politician's name and replaced it with Garfield. When Garfield won, Charles marched up to the White House, claiming to be owed some credit and wanted to be rewarded for his efforts by being made a consul to Vienna or Paris. He was told to scram, and he was so mad that he decided then and there he'd teach them a lesson by killing Garfield. So he went to a store and chose to spend a little extra cash on the 2 ivory-handed pistol because he thought it would look better in a museum as a gun that killed the president. He was short $1, so the shopkeep lowered the price, and Charles then set about making plans for his eventual arrest, such as trying to tour the prison where he assumed he'd be jailed. His first opportunity to kill Garfield came as the president was seeing his wife off at a train station, but Charles felt it'd be cruel to kill a man in front of his 6th wife, so he waited. His next chance popped up as Garfield was hanging out with Robert Todd Lincoln, who had a knack for being close with the presidents who got killed. Charles walks up, fires, and was immediately arrested. And thankfully he wasn't all bad. As he was being loaded up, he handed the cops his guns, which they had forgotten to grab from him. Garfield was taken back home, and the doctors dug around inside him with dirty fingers looking for the bullet. We'll come back to that. The Navy rigged up a makeshift air conditioner for Garfield to help with the fever, and even called in a cameo from Alexander Graham Bell to make a metal detector to find the bullet. But they didn't account for Garfield being on a metal-framed bed or bother to check the side of his body where the bullet was lodged. Not getting any better, they sent Garfield by train to a cottage on the beach where volunteers helped to build a rail line to the cottage to make it easier. Remember how they kept digging in the wound with dirty fingers and tools? Yeah, that got infected, and after nearly 80 days of misery, Garfield died. Modern doctors and historians believe he would have been fine if they just treated the wound and not worried about the bullet, or at the very least been smarter about getting it out. Charles sat in jail until his trial, where he insulted his lawyers, gave testimony in the form of poetry, and passed notes to people in the audience asking for advice. He sang, put out ads in the newspaper looking for a wife, and had plans to go on a speaking tour once he was found innocent, which he was not. Well, at least it goes to show that people have always been insane, I guess, you know? People being absolute bat crap and doing insane things in the name of politics isn't a modern phenomenon. Seriously though, sucks James Garfield didn't have some doctors with, like, you know, a half a brain. Anyways, guys, I think that's gonna do it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate you taking a second to press the like button. Let me know in the comments section down below what you thought, and subscribe if you're new and turn on those notifications. If you really want to help me out, I do post these on Spotify, so you can listen without gameplay, whatever floats your boat. Feel free to check that out. Link in the top of the description. Use code Scrubby at the G Fuel checkout. And yeah, on that note, don't get anyone pregnant. If you do, make sure they're hot. I'm out. Peace.